No time to talk about this subject than in our battered economy. We're going to be talking about employment law next on Due Process.
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
Because we can't reinvent traffic, we reinvented how the driver navigates around it. You can learn more about this and other reinventions at lexus.com/allnewrx.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Thank you. I'm Henry Baskin, and this is Due Process. We're going to talk about employment law, a subject we've talked about in the last several years many times, because right now it seems to be a very opportune moment to sit down and see what the options are for people who are unemployed or those who have been asked to take furloughs and leaves of absence and things such as that. To do that, we've invited the very best people we could find in the metropolitan area, and indeed they are. On my left is Kathleen Bogas, who is known primarily as representing the employees, right?
That's right.
Okay, get that right. And Patricia Nemeth, I want to tell you, you are known as one of the busiest employment lawyers, and you represent the employers, do you not?
That's correct.
And you never change roles, do you?
No.
Okay, you might someday.
I'd have.
Since you know both sides of the case. What is happening out there right now in the market? I mean, I just told you that I was online and saw that GM might let another 7,000 people go. They're at-will employees, I guess. So you can just say go, and here's your package, and take it or leave it.
I don't know what you saw online, so I don't know if they're at-will employees or if they're unionized employees.
It didn't say.
So there might be some unionized employees, and they might have some obligations under the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay.
So that might be an issue with the GM employees.
Well, I was just going to ask Kathy, when they decide that they're going to, cut it, I mean, they just have to either go into bankruptcy as they did, or cut the workforce as they're trying to do. What rights do these people have? Because aside from the union contract, typically they're at-will employees. In other words, they don't have a contract.
Correct. But if I can back up a second, Henry, because
Sure.
You should understand that they're not just General Motors or whoever generally in this economic time isn't just going to cut somebody. They're going to offer some kind of package,
Right.
and get volunteers to come out.
Okay, that's the first line. They ask for the
Right.
volunteers first.
And if people don't volunteer, then they have to make the hard decisions. And employees, while you are presumed in Michigan to be an at-will employee, if you are not a member of a collective bargaining
Or you don't
unit,
have a signed contract.
correct. Well, a lot of people who sign contracts are also at-will employees, but
Really?
you then can look at very limited legal options, and that is there an illegal discrimination? An illegal discrimination, age, race, religion, color, national origin, handicap in some circumstances. And then there's a few other areas where you may have claims, like a whistleblower claim or a public policy claim. But if somebody doesn't like somebody because of their personality, there's no protection there for the employee. And then they have to make a decision. Are they going to sign whatever release or package is given to them? Because very few employers give a package without a requirement that you sign a release.
Yeah, there's that release package, that clause, a release clause. There's also a non-compete contained in that too, in a lot of cases I've seen. What's happened to non-compete clauses in the state of Michigan? Because I know that nationally there's been a movement to take them out of these contracts.
Well, non-competes, it used to be in Michigan that they weren't recognized at all, but
Right.
There is a statute in Michigan that does recognize non-competes,
I know that.
and as long as they are reasonable, they will be upheld in the state of Michigan. So there are things that are looked at in terms of the geographical you know, how far out the geographical location is in terms of whether or not the person can work within 50 miles of the radius, how many years the person is prohibited from working, whether it's 1 year, whether it's 2 years, the competitors in terms of the individual, where they cannot work, whether it's too prohibitive, whether it's not too prohibitive. The person, they're not going to uphold the contract if the individual, if it's too prohibitive. So whether it's reasonable, whether it's not reasonable.
But, you know, can I?
Sure, go ahead.
You know, these are the worst provisions that are out there right now. It's one thing if you sign a release and they're going to give you something for not competing.
Okay.
But most employers make you agree to it right when you hire in, or during the course of your employment. And if you don't sign it, they can fire you for not signing a non-compete. So even before you know what the consequences are of what the employer is going to do to you, you end up agreeing, and you don't have a choice, that you're not going to compete. And it's a horrible provision because it keeps people from getting jobs and making a living.
Well, I think that the courts, you know, whether or not you determine to work for somebody or not work for somebody, you know, going in the door, that's up to you. And I think the employer has a right, or doesn't have a right, you know, to enforce these non-competes. A lot of times the courts are not going to enforce these non-competes unless they're at a higher level at the company. So, you know, employers, when they go in and do try to enforce these agreements, a lot of times the courts are not enforcing them unless they pertain to higher level employees. But if you do have an employee that has access to your marketing information, your trade secret information, your confidential information, and they're going to another company, and in this environment, you know, and they're taking that information, then you have a right to protect that information. And it's hard enough for employers in this environment.
Well, I want to get back to the intellectual part of this thing, but the point is, let's take a typical situation. Someone says to you, you tell your employer, here's what you offer these people before you let them go. And then they take it to their lawyer. They take it to Kathy and they say, is this fair? Here's the deal. You get 6 months of severance pay. You can't compete. I don't know about the mileage, but say you can't compete in this industry for 6 months. And you can't take any information that you learned working for us, which is proprietary, and use it at another company. Okay, that's your deal.
Right.
And we're going to give you some benefits for a while, or let you continue on health insurance, however they feel about it. They go to Kathy. Kathy, what do you do with that? Can you go back and negotiate with Patricia?
Or with her employer. They choose not to have her. But I can count on one hand how many times the length of severance has been the same length that they insist the non-compete is, first of all. They don't pay you anywhere near as long a period of time as they make you not to compete. And that's an argument that a lawyer can make to a defense counsel or to an employer directly. But when we have somebody come in and we do an evaluation of their severance package, if we don't think that it's in their best interest to sign it, we will contact the company and attempt to renegotiate.
But the companies have said, we're not going to give you this unless you sign it. We're not going to give you this severance pay unless you sign it.
Understand, but it's the role, and Pat will certainly correct me if I'm wrong, it's the desire of the employer to get as many people as possible to sign that release, because they don't want it hanging over their head that somebody may bring a claim in the next 3 years or there.
But there's so many people being terminated that it seems overwhelming that either one of you can keep up with all this, because my experience has been this. In entertainment contracts, there's clauses, 2 months non-compete within the same market, 3 months, 6 months. It is so subjective. It is so subjective. I've had judges impose a 6-month penalty, a 6-month non-compete that a guy signed when he got his job, and this federal judge decided that this man made too much money and we're going to keep him from competing for 6 months. Other judges in Oakland County, for example, have said, you know what, I think 60 days would be maximum, like denying someone the right to work. The point I'm making is that there is a movement in 8 states now, or 8 states have already passed legislation, that as far as the entertainment industry is concerned, television, news people, you can't stop them from going to work next door.
And that's up to the legislature. That's up to the Michigan legislature if they want to pass such a law. Right now, there's no such law in Michigan. But you have to understand that non-competes in Michigan, we're not talking about lower level employees. You know, the individuals, I don't see non-competes with
For
people.
line workers?
For line workers. We don't see non-compete language for line workers.
Well, what about salespeople?
We don't see it for
salespeople,
sales,
they have
for a
all the-
lot of
well,
salespeople.
they have all the contacts.
You see the non-competes for upper echelon employees
Well,
a lot of
maybe for your
times
employers, not mine.
in the releases.
Was
I
she-
see, I'll tell you, the mortgage industry,
is an
every one of these
example.
kids that come out of college, their first job is in the mortgage industry.
Right.
When they sign up, they get hired, they sign a 2-year non-compete. The first job they have, they're learning how to be a mortgage broker, and they can't work if they leave the job or are terminated for 2 years.
Do they understand that?
No, of course
When they
not.
sign it?
Nobody reads it.
And again, if somebody believes that it's not reasonable, you can challenge it in court. If they think that a 2-year period of time is not reasonable, then it's challenged in court. It's challenged all the time.
And it costs money to challenge
Oh, I know
in
it
court.
is. I've been there several times doing it and with different results every time I go. I mean, it's getting to be.
But it costs money to enforce it. I mean, is somebody really going to go after a mortgage broker straight out of college?
I don't know about a mortgage broker.
I mean,
I'll
but
tell
somebody
you who.
is going to go after somebody who, you know, is an upper echelon employee that's taking trade secrets, and maybe this person does have confidential information, and maybe that's why they are enforcing
what
it.
about the
I mean,
proprietary
it's competitive
information?
out there.
They-
I can understand why they would.
They have separate provisions, and I've never had a client say I won't use proprietary, that I will use it, or
Right.
that confidential information. You can still do a job as a mortgage broker or many other jobs without using confidential or proprietary information.
Well,
it's
yeah,
the tools
but-
of the trade.
But it's in here,
It
and
is.
you have it in your head, and it's so hard to disgorge it. I mean, you can't do. Someone said to me, well, "We're going to do a brain dump." I said, "What is that?" This was a New York media company. A brain dump. I said, "What does he do? A brain dump? You drill a hole in their brain and knock out everything they've learned for the last 10 years. Impossible."
Of course.
I mean, that's impossible. But I guess what I'm saying is, people are faced with a choice of either taking the deal that Ford Motor offered, for example, or staying. Now,
Right.
I don't know how you help them make that decision, don't you?
I never make the decision for them. I will tell them legally what their rights are, but I always say I don't walk in your economic shoes, and
Right.
I'm not going to tell you
Well,
what to do.
isn't the threat that if you don't take this deal that I'm offering you now, that we're not going to offer it to you again, and later on we can terminate you?
I don't know if that's a threat necessarily. I mean, there's a possibility that there's not going to be a buyout down the
Right.
road.
Well, that's what I mean.
You know,
I don't
I-
mean
I-
a threat
yeah.
as such, but it's a tactic.
It's a potential that the buyout might not be there next year.
Right.
But that's a decision that
Well,
individual has to make.
How do people make that decision? I mean, it seems almost impossible. I mean, take your money, lose your job, and where do you go next?
Many people have come to me and said, look, my boss gave me this buyout, and he said, oh, by the way, and if you don't take it, you may be one of those, and you're not going to get anything other than a standard severance. So there is force and pressure on people to take these buyouts.
You know,
And
this-
if it's your boss saying, wink, wink, you better take this buyout, you know what's going to happen.
Go ahead.
I don't know. I mean, the whole discussion kind of bothers me because I have employers that are calling me in these economic times. They're trying to save employees' jobs. You know?
Well, yeah, they want the work done.
No. They're trying to save employees' jobs instead of trying to lay them off. I mean, I hear all these discussions going on about, you know, they're trying to get rid of them, wink, wink, they're trying to lay people off here and there. I have employers that are calling me that are trying, you know, like the state of Michigan, that are saying, how can we not lay people off? How can we try to save employees'
Tell me
jobs?
how. Tell me what you tell
I
them.
mean, like the state of Michigan, you know, they are going through, you know, furloughs
Right.
and things like that. I have employers that call me and say, okay, how can we maybe not permanently lay people off? How can we maybe do furloughs with people? And I've had companies that have furloughed individuals maybe an extra week per year so that they don't have to permanently lay people off. I've had them, rather than reduce their workforce by 25%, they've had employees take 1 week off and rotate them through 25% of the workforce. I've had individuals, including the CEOs, take a 10% reduction in pay.
Right.
You know, I've had them go to individuals and talk to them about, you know, working reduction in hours and take a reduction in pay rather than lay people off.
Well, Brooks Patterson did that. He's asked for 2.5% in 2009 and 2.5% back in 2010 from the employees, the county employees. And they said, well, if we're going to save other people's jobs, we'll agree to that. And apparently they did. But I'm not sure about the furloughs, because if you furlough someone or close an office on Monday, that means you have more work to do on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So I'm not certain.
But that's happening everywhere with the reduction in workforce. Everybody's workload has increased. And I'm not saying employers are going around trying to fire people.
Well,
I mean, I think
well,
in
it'd
this
be
economy, we're not.
counterintuitive to fire people if
Right.
if you have work that has to be done.
Right.
And they need workers.
But there is an increased workload on those who remain. It's
It would
clear.
be. We have someone here, Barbara Allushuski, who's the president of Right Management. Oh, hi, Barbara.
Hello, Henry.
Thanks. Hey, you've heard the discussion here. What does your company do, Right Management?
Our company is a career transition services firm. So employers contract with my company when they do have to reduce their workforce. The individuals will come with us and we get them ready for their next job. We teach them how to write resumes, how to network, how to interview, all of those kinds of things to get them job ready for the next step in their life.
Do you suggest retraining into another skill?
Absolutely. We perform assessments, so we help the candidate understand what some of their skill strengths are, and very definitely some of their limitations as well. The kinds of things that didn't work well for them in their former job, perhaps even the culture that they were working in.
Well, most people lose their jobs because there's no work at the company. Not for any other reason, but the company, say a tier 1 supplier, there's no one to sell to, so they lose their jobs. I mean, they could be really qualified people, but they're losing their jobs not because the employer doesn't want them around, but because they can't use all these people in their workforce.
Absolutely, Henry, but it's very surprising how many employees who work in some of these companies for perhaps 20 or 25 years have never really taken the time out to say, gee, do I really want to go back and work for the same type of industry? This might be a time for me to go through an assessment, figure out what I'm really good at, figure out perhaps an entirely different career path.
You know,
so many times it's a blessing for them.
It's an interesting point, because typically in times such as this, the college enrollment goes up. Oakland University up 4%. Cooley Law School,
That's right.
the largest law school in the United States now, has just enrolled 700 freshmen. They're going to 1,000 next year. So people are taking advantage of that. I don't know if they can afford to do that, but they're taking advantage of the fact that they have to terminate or leave their jobs and look for something else to do. Sometimes it's a blessing, I agree with you, but frequently I've seen lines of people holding their resumes in their hands and saying, the pat answer is, we'll get back to you.
It's usually a necessity going back to school, because you are trying to do something to better yourself, to make yourself more marketable.
Right.
That's what I see.
It's benefited us on the university level. It's helped the state have more qualified people as we move into a different era, different age. But who pays your fees? Is it the employer that pays it?
The employer pays our fees, yes. We contract directly with the employer. We also are on site so that when these large reductions in force occur, it can be large or small actually, but the extent of it is that we are meeting with the leadership of that company. We are walking them through how to conduct a reduction in force, because you're very worried about the employees who remain behind.
You're working with Patricia from time to time in some kind of strategy to reduce the workforce?
No, we would be working.
I'm not talking about a conspiracy here. I'm just talking about.
Yeah, no, our client is normally the human resources department of a company.
Okay.
That's who would normally retain us. And we would help them with the script and how they should work with the employees, what they should say to the employees. And, the truth works, Henry. The times are such that The economy is not really robust right now, and
No, I
employers are
understand.
facing very hard decisions. And they do this with severance pay for the employees. They do this by offering them outplacement services with companies like Right Management. And we are there on site to meet with the employee when this is happening.
Any
We take
idea
them back
what-
to our home and really treat them well.
What's your success rate?
Our
So you-
success rate is very good.
Is it really?
The thing is that often candidates do not let us know when they land because they might be working with us for 3 months, 6 months. They might land that job and not report back to us exactly what the landing is. So,
Well, you and Kathy here must hear some terrible stories about people who say, my grandfather worked at Chrysler, my father worked at Chrysler. I thought for sure that I would spend the rest of my life until I bought my boat and my hunting camp at Chrysler. And there literally are tears in their eyes.
absolutely.
I've seen it.
Absolutely.
It's not just
it's,
Chrysler. There's a number.
Well, no,
of them.
I'm just
yeah, but I
using it
know,
as
but
an
Chrysler
example.
is one. But one of the problems with first of all, regarding the outplacement, it's a wonderful event if people want to take advantage of it because it's not taxable.
Okay.
It's not a taxable event, and everything else basically is to the employee.
Listen, this is not termination. We got to go to a break. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We're on due process, and we'll be right back talking about employment and how to get a job if you're terminated.
Legal referrals and more information on this and other related topics are available on our website at www.dueprocess.tv. There you'll find information on today's program, helpful hints to legal issues, support materials, and lawyer referrals. You can also stream previous episodes of Due Process.
Thank you. We're back on due process talking to some of the best people you can possibly talk to if you're an employer or an employee or if you've been terminated. Thank you so much for staying with us. We have, what other things are offered to people who are going to be terminated by a company? And these are companies of all sizes. I mean, severance pay is one, right?
Severance pay, continuation of benefits, health care benefits. Now we have COBRA that 65% by law has to be paid by the employer.
For how long, though? Is there a period?
It's only through right now. It's only through the end of this year, but they get the money back from the government.
Yeah, it's
They pay
reimbursed after a certain period of time.
Right, 65%, then the employee pays 35%. We're hoping it gets extended.
Oh, that's great.
It is.
Okay.
It's a wonderful thing that's occurred.
Sometimes outplacement benefits are offered
Right.
through places like Right Management. Sometimes there's a recommendation letter that is offered by the employer to the employee.
But also what you understand, many times the employer wants that you agree you won't say anything bad about them. You won't disparage them, whether it be true or not.
Yeah.
They want you to, and they cannot generally say the same about you because there's so many people that they would try to have to control under
Right.
that. There are other provisions.
Non-disparagement clauses have been around for a long time.
Well, I then not so much as employment. It's probably been about 5, 6, 7 years that's
Really?
really grown. Yeah. But that doesn't mean people can't testify truthfully.
I know, but it's so subjective. You know, it's like the non-compete time, non-disparagement. I didn't say anything disparaging about you. You're a lousy company. I mean,
But disparagement means something negative. It's not defamatory.
I
It's
know.
disparagement.
But it's more important now than it might have been prior to 5 or 6 years ago because of the internet for employers. I mean, you have
yes.
you have blogs now, and so for employers, it's much more important not to disparage them or the company or.
Well, I want to get back to that. Before Barbara, I want to thank you for being with us, and good luck with Right Way. I hope I don't see you someday.
Oh, my pleasure, Henry.
Thank you so much. Talking about the internet, this is very interesting because there are blogs, people who engage in defamatory statements on these blogs
Yeah.
about companies.
Yeah.
And we've tried to find out who, we've gone to some of the federal judges to try and find out who the authors are. Can't find out. I mean, it's been sort of difficult.
There
And
was
is that
a
part of your deal, your severance deal?
Well, there's non-disparagement clauses, but within that clause, you can have that is encompassed within the clause. You can't disparage. That includes
Anyway.
in
Okay.
any fashion. But there was a recent case you might have heard of involving a PR firm in the Detroit area that involved a Twitter matter. It wasn't necessarily an employment case, but they did find out and are looking into and trying to find damages with respect to the identity of who was involved in that matter.
What did they find out?
They are looking into it.
Okay, well, will you come back and let us know?
It's going to be hard to find out.
I have to say, they give me the rap sign, but I want to tell you something. I can think of no two better people to discuss each end of this than the two of you. And if we do it again, we get you back here.
Sounds good.
All right.
Because
Thanks,
you're
Henry.
both very passionate about
Not us.
yeah, I'd love to see both of you in court someday. I mean, where are your cases usually tried? Federal court or?
Mostly federal court now.
We're all over the place. We've had them federal, state.
really?
court, Yeah.
Well, you know, I know Kathleen's been in a long time, and well, I know you've been doing it longer than I have. But good luck to you. And let's hope things turn
Major funding for Due Process is provided by Meade Lexus of Southfield and Meade Lexus of Lakeside, offering a large selection of new and pre-owned certified premium vehicles.
Because we can't reinvent traffic, we reinvented how the driver navigates around it. You can learn more about this and other reinventions at lexus.com/allnewrx.
And by WWJ News Radio 950, keeping you up to date with the latest news, traffic, weather, sports, and business information 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.